Hey, good morning.
And happy Wednesday to you. For those of you who observe, happy Ash Wednesday to you.
And happy warm Wednesday. It is 5 degrees above zero. And we were just talking about that we're, either umbrella drinks ready this afternoon because we're going to go bask in the heat wave on the beach.
Yes.
Or maybe just go outside in shorts or something. Well, no, I don't own a pair of shorts, so we just don't do that. Yeah. So anyway, we digress.
Anyway, welcome to Rural Community Solutions, where we help you design family-friendly, youth-centered places where you grow and thrive. So I'm Kim Spillers.
And I'm Frank Spillers, and we're here today to visit about supporting an entrepreneurial economy in your community. Ecosystem building. And what does that really mean? And what does that mean for your entrepreneurs? So come on back as we explore how to build an entrepreneurial ecosystem on the airwaves.
Picture, if you will, the pure, raw prairie. No wires, no fences, no roads, not even a farmhouse. No sign of civilization. This is what a person saw that was crossing the prairie in a wagon more than 170 years ago. They jumped off the wagon, looked around, and declared, "This is where I want to settle and build a town. A great place to live and a great place to raise my family." So they took a risk. They built a house made out of the land, planted food to eat, and cared for the land. Then they wrote back to their friends where they came from and described the great opportunity and promise that they have found. They invited who they knew to join them in their discovery, people they had a relationship with, and so they came, family by family, and those families invited others they knew, who they wanted to live with within that community. The communities grew because the needs of the families grew, so entrepreneurs started businesses to meet those community needs. Ice houses, broom factories, general stores, and many other types of sole proprietor entrepreneurial businesses started up within the community. All of our communities across this country, all around the world, were started in this way, with a vision of the future and a plan to grow with people.
Growing with people is what we do at Rural Community Solutions. In celebration of National Entrepreneurship Week, all week long, we have guests, and today we are super excited. Welcome, Nick and Kaitlyn. Nick Castner and Kaitlyn Claeys are going to join us today. They do ecosystem building. What in the world is that? So we're going to find out today here at Rural Community Solutions. So welcome. We're so glad you're here.
Thank you so much for having us. We're really happy about that warm welcome, about that weather. So it's a great way to get started on this Wednesday.
Yes, Frank, I would not advise going out in shorts. Yes.
Well, even in 100-degree weather, I don't go out in shorts. So there you go.
So there's your. He's a pants guy. That's okay. That's
I'm normally a shorts guy, but the pants are on today. But thank you thank you so much for having us. I'm very excited for this conversation.
We're really grateful.
So just as kind of a geography lesson, Kaitlyn's down in Austin, Texas, and Nick is in Omaha, Nebraska. But it's almost worse weather down in Austin, Texas, than it is up here in the Midwest. So thank you, Kaitlyn, for taking that off our hands this time.
Oh, we appreciate it. All right. Well, I'm sure you have loads to share. So why don't you guys just kind of start with a little introduction? We know that, Nick, you do some freelancing and you guys do some podcasting. You're the experts. Why don't you just give us a snapshot of who you are? And since ladies go first, Kaitlyn. Did you hear me, Kaitlyn? Miss Kaitlyn.
So she actually warned us because
that's right.
She's frozen. Yes, with all the ice.
She's like literally frozen in Austin right now. So, okay, Nick, while she's reestablishing her connection, since this is live TV, Nick, why don't you roll with it and she'll be back in.
fingers crossed that Kaitlyn can hop back in. Yes, but so I started, I guess, my entrepreneurial journey almost 2 years ago. I was working for a startup, and I was contacted by the regional newspaper to host a podcast on entrepreneurship. And it was one of those opportunities that I committed to before they even finished the question. I have always loved podcasting and thought this was a great opportunity. And my assignment was to go out and make a handful of episodes. And as I started doing that, in the same week, the startup I was working for went through a restructuring, laid off 20% of their staff, myself included. And the editor-in-chief of that newspaper emailed me that they were dropping my podcast project. So I had 2 gigs and lost them both in the same week, which made for a tough week. But I was in one of those inflection moments where I had to decide what to do next. And I realized I really loved podcasting. So dove head first into podcasting. And in my freelance, I started as a freelancer. I made the Commonwealth, which is the podcast I host, and I'm devote a bunch of my energy to, and then paid the bills by doing production work. And then eventually my podcast grew that I landed a title sponsor and issued my first line of merch and did like traditional podcast monetization avenues. And then I very recently I got connected with a media company out of Omaha called Hurrdat Media, and a 30-minute like coffee chat turned into a 90-minute job interview. And they were kind of doing what I was doing, but just at a much greater scale. So we all decided it was best to join forces, and I'm now working at Hurrdat Media, but then am contributing to Mug.News, which is a new tech news outlet that covers the middle. And it kind of stemmed from the need of just telling more entrepreneurial stories in the Midwest. So that is the broad focus of the tech blog. And then the show Kaitlyn and I host is called the Ecosystem Builder Podcast. And it interviews different community leaders throughout the Midwest on both the, I guess, aspects of their startup ecosystem and also like the successes they've had that they can share, and then others can apply it to their own communities.
Well, go a little bit further into that. So you interview leaders from around the Midwest. Tell us how do you find those people? Who's a leader?
Yes. So a good place to start is a lot of chamber of commerce. A lot of chamber of commerces. Is that the right word? Plural? Yeah.
Chambers of commerce.
Chambers of commerce. Thank you. Yes. So a lot of chambers have a person or role devoted to entrepreneurial building and fostering an environment for startups to thrive. So that's kind of where we start. And then a lot of the guests then come from just word of mouth of like, oh, who else do you know in this space? And then sometimes we also reach out to people in very specific communities of like an entrepreneurial from Cleveland, for example, would know the ecosystem builder in Cleveland.
Okay. So that's really interesting. So where are you finding yourself working in the rural space? Because there are no chambers of commerce in many rural communities. So to have a
smaller ones, you'll find them in your county seats, but in like your smaller communities, they might not have the chambers.
Right. So, is there kind of a demographic of population with whom you're working, at least currently?
Yes. So we've hit a lot of like, I guess, the major metropolitan areas throughout the Midwest, like Omaha, Fargo, and Kansas City, Minneapolis. However, the rural component is something that I guess have focused on in the past and hope to continue to focus on that obviously like a rural community. I'm from a small town, Sydney, Nebraska. It's a small town in the Panhandle, about 6,000 people. Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Okay, there's a rabbit hole there that we're going down. So
yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, yeah, that's a big deal. Okay.
Yes, and Kaitlyn is actually from a small town in Wisconsin as well. So hopefully she pops back on. As I was kind of thinking through this, I knew the small town connection because both Kaitlyn and I are from small towns, but then have gone on to do things beyond our rural community. But I'm definitely like a small town kid and valued the small community I grew up in.
Okay.
But where were we at? What was the question again?
Well, so the
talk a
question
little
was
bit-
about
talk-
rural demographics.
Yeah, talk a little bit. What let's define before we do that. Let's define what an ecosystem builder is.
Yes. So the term ecosystem is a newer term in the broader economic development community, and the kind of thought process is that there are similar to an ecosystem, and the term ecosystem is usually used in like the science community. And similar to those types of ecosystems, there's a bunch of factors and components that lead to a startup both beginning and then scaling and eventually like employing people, bringing jobs to the town. And ecosystem building is I guess, self-declared, but sometimes it can just be an assumed role of someone in the community, making sure all those components are in place to lead to that healthy ecosystem that allow new businesses to both start and flourish.
Okay, we call those spark plugs.
Yeah,
those are the kind of people. Think like an entrepreneur, become a spark plug. And often it's not your paid official. It's not your traditional leader who is really the best person to run with developing a community. So that's really fun that you have learned that as well.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And there's so many things like, and Tom Chapman, who is, I guess, the founder of Mug.News, his first question as he kind of advises different communities is, do you know who your entrepreneurs are? Because that's step one, like who's out there in your community starting things. And it's valuable that if they're connected with one another. So having someone in a community to assume that role of like knowing who the players are and then helping, like kind of arranging the team so they're working together and hiring one another when needed. And all of that, like that is a very, very important part of ecosystem building. And Kaitlyn is back.
She is back. Yay.
We knew that it was potentially risky to have you down
we
there.
knew it was colder in Texas too because you froze.
Yeah, you did. It's like, Kaitlyn, hello, Kaitlyn.
Yeah,
in,
you
Kaitlyn.
mentioned umbrella. Yes, hi. I'm so sorry. The power went out as Nick and I had the conversation that this might happen. So thank you so much for your patience. If you wouldn't mind, where are we right now in the conversation?
I'll fill you in. And since this is your mic volume went down, so if you can adjust your mic volume to be a little bit higher, that would help a little bit. And so what we have been talking about is kind of the question on the table is, why is entrepreneurial ecosystem so important into a community, and how and the podcast builds those ecosystems. We've talked about the spark plug, or as we call them, spark plugs. As you guys call them, they're the non-leaders that are really building the ecosystems within those communities. They're not the traditional types of folks on there. So so that's kind of where we are, but now where we're going
well
where your guys' passion. I mean, why do you do what you do with entrepreneurs?
And maybe you can weave that in where you froze was introducing yourself.
Yeah.
So and there she went again.
Dang.
Okay, here's the key. Right. She doesn't want to know. She doesn't want us to know who she is.
Oh, bless her little self. Gotta love technology. They just done ice and snow and things like that can impair things. So let's go ahead and run with you then, Nick, with that question.
Which was
why do you do what you do, and where's the passion for entrepreneurship?
Why do I do what I do? So I have really just found a love for making content. And I think there's a bunch of different like types of answers of why. For example, like the, I guess, kind of savior, like I want to change the world, is one type of answer, and then another is like I'm like have the perfect skill set to do this, and like both of those are completely acceptable. Mine is I think a little less sexy, but I just love it. Like I really, really like interviewing people and meeting people across the country and talking with them and asking challenging questions and provoking thought and building digital communities. So I just really love it. And if I won the lottery, if I won the lottery tomorrow or got laid off from my job again, I would continue to do what I'm doing.
So that brings up a good point.
Yes.
Of you're an entrepreneur. You're really, I mean, you think like an entrepreneur, but you work for somebody else, but yet you're still an entrepreneur in your personality. I mean, that's really what a business needs to capture.
Well, and what you have just described is exactly what we say. What would you do if you didn't get paid for it? And you just said you'd keep doing it if you lost your job. And that's when you really know that this is in your heart, this is in your soul, this is absolutely who you are, what you want to do. You know that's the purpose you were put here on earth, and you just figure out how to make it work to pay the bills.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. In the entrepreneur comment, this new opportunity with Herdat has developed. It started about 4 months ago now. So I am, I guess, a newly found entrepreneur. However, there's like benefits of being an entrepreneur, but there's also a lot of benefits of joining a company. Like you have a team and more consistency and less worry about the bills getting paid. And I'm able to do so much more while focusing in on what I'm really like the best at. So while it's a different mindset, I have really just enjoyed and have began to thrive in this new role.
Yeah, you need to find the book. It's by Gordon McKenzie. He used to work for Hallmark Cards. It's a real small, long book, but it's called Orbiting the Giant Hairball. And it's all about an entrepreneurial thinking person that orbits the hairball of a big bureaucracy. And that's kind of, that's where people are, because the hairball, like you said, has those benefits. But yet there's a lot of people that are comfortable in the hairball where they are surrounded by structure and rules and regulations. But there's a lot of us that are comfortable with the rules and regulations, and we want to be connected to them, but still have an autonomous entrepreneurial mindset of that. So that's it's a great book, and he talks about how he deals with kids and creativity.
Interesting. And what's the name of it again?
It's called Orbiting the Giant Hairball.
Okay.
And it's by Gordon McKenzie. And welcome back, Kaitlyn.
Yes, Kaitlyn has changed rooms, we can see. So, and taken off your headphones. So let's jump on talking to you so that hopefully we'll be able to have you with us the rest of the show. So welcome back. Give us a little snapshot of who you are and how'd you get into this world anyway? Not literally, of course.
So, yes, here is hoping I stay on. Are you able to hear me okay?
We are, yes.
Okay, fantastic. So a little bit about me. I work in voiceover and working with film content creation. I am so happy to have a position here at Mug.News as a multimedia content creator. And through Mug.News, I'm able to articles and making fun holiday skits.
Wow.
She's just having
fun.
Oh, golly, Kaitlyn,
we were so close.
yeah.
So close.
All right. So she mentioned Nick. She mentioned Mug.News, Mug.News. Can you explain a little bit what is Mug.News?
Yes, Mug.News is an outlet that covers the areas that traditional like entrepreneurial and tech media miss, and we define it as the middle. So outside of the coast, places in the heartland that may not be like the biggest metropolitan areas, but there's still entrepreneurial activity happening. And one part of a healthy ecosystem that we kind of described earlier is having the I guess stories told of the entrepreneurial activity that's happening in a community. That it's important for the traditional newspaper to cover the new businesses in town, and in that example, it gives both the people inside of the community, I guess, talking points of what to highlight to people outside of the community, but it is also the chance that when someone searches your community on Google, something comes up. So it's the benefits of ecosystem storytelling are like both have internal benefits, but then like external people coming in also have the chance to learn more. So that is really what Mug.News is founded in, is telling those stories that often get missed in the traditional like tech/startup space.
Okay.
Interesting.
Okay.
Very interesting.
So what's the best story you've ever heard?
Best story I've ever heard. Kaitlyn, I see you blinking. Are you on?
Yeah, she's moving. Your audio was unstable.
There's a delay. So she is
give
there.
it a try,
Yes,
Kaitlyn.
All right, testing. The power is completely out here, so my Wi-Fi might not be able to support this as much. Are you able to hear me at all?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
We're like nodding like bobbleheads.
Okay.
Yeah. For those of you that live in metropolitan areas and are experiencing this, yes, Kaitlyn is in metropolitan Austin. However, this is the issue that rural entrepreneurs can bump up into because of the lack of broadband in rural areas. So that is another aspect that we are working on for entrepreneurship ecosystem building, is the support mechanism for broadband across the board in rural areas, so people have a competitive advantage across wherever they may live across the country. So just a little side note as we build policy, as we start to support that policy.
Yes.
Did you want to go down the Sydney route and with ecosystems?
Well, I wanted to get back to one of the stories that.
Oh yes. Okay. So all of my content for Mug.News is through the podcast, so it's all interviews. Kaitlyn does a lot more writing and like features, and we also kind of have like a comic section, like satire, which is just fun to see what they kick out on a weekly basis. So Kaitlyn has more, I guess, diverse stories. However, my favorite interview I've done was with Cecilia Wessinger. She is out of Tulsa, Oklahoma, and her expertise is advising communities on creating a more inclusive environment. And especially with all of the like Black Lives Matter and the George Floyd murder this past summer, I had a chance to talk to her a few months after that on like actionable steps that a community can take to make sure we're including everyone, and that people, regardless of their like gender or background or race or sexual orientation, have a sense of belonging when you go about leading and building a community.
Okay. All right.
She's an interesting lady.
Absolutely. Incredibly dynamic.
Well, I do want to get back to where you grew up, Nick, in Sydney, Nebraska. And the interest there is that I, back in the early 90s, that's probably
before you were
before
born.
you were born.
By a few years, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
We're just experienced, honey. It's okay.
Anyway,
Wise.
back then, way back then, when I got into my little Flintstone car and could travel that way, I traveled the western half of Nebraska with the Department of Economic Development, and so Sydney was in there. In fact, I'm a graduate of Chadron State College out in the Panhandle.
Okay.
So those are my stomping grounds. I was born and raised in Rapid City and the western Nebraska. That's all my stomping grounds. And so in Sydney, we uphold Sydney as a former, I'm not quite sure if it still is, but as a former entrepreneurial support economy system, only because they found and opened their hearts to the Cabela brothers. And that's a story that we tell for rural America on how you cannot close your hearts or your minds to local people that might have a passion for building a business. We tell the story of how they started in Chapel, Nebraska, 26 miles away in their basement. The Chapel, Nebraska community fathers turned their backs on them. Somebody from Sydney said, yeah, we got a building downtown, come take a look at it, and the rest is history. I mean, that's how Cabela started, and that is the closed mindset of some of our rural communities of, nobody helped me get into business, so why should I help you get into business? And I think that's the story of how do we build entrepreneurial ecosystems that really open our hearts, open your minds to people that already live in your community, that have a creative spirit that we can help foster and we can help support.
Yes, yeah, and to, I guess, kind of fill in on some of the Cabela's color, that two brothers started shipping flies out of their basement, and when they started, it was 5 flies for a quarter, and they put an ad in some magazine, and they didn't sell any. And then for the next ad, they changed the marketing that it was 5 flies for free, send a quarter for shipping, and they sold out. And then those same brothers started that, grew that business into a $5 billion company that was sold to Bass Pro a couple of years ago,
Right.
and employed hundreds, if not thousands, of people out of this small town in Sydney, Nebraska. I guess, Frank, I'm surprised to hear that happens in rural communities. There's just, I guess, kind of closed nature of the situation you just walked through. So does it, I guess?
It does. Yeah, in my experience, it does. That because you were born or you're there, and you might have a creative idea, until you are successful, really communities don't. And I don't want to paint a general broad brush because there are some communities that get it. Network Kansas has really flipped the ecosystem on its head of really building a good structure that supports entrepreneurship. And with Entrepreneurial Ecosystems, E2, with Don Mackey, he has studied and he has really built processes and research around entrepreneurial communities and how they support their systems. So there's certain elements scientifically, actually, that you can build into your community. But a lot of the rural communities we work with just don't get it. They're still in the, if I recruit a business of 100 jobs, that will save our community, instead of trying to dig out the entrepreneur that says, you have a creative idea. How do we foster your idea and we can build it to then make you a next phase entrepreneur? So it's that type. And some of those entrepreneurs that start a business within the rural community where they grow up, I mean, it's just like the Cabela experience with the Chapel city fathers. They looked at the business and said, no one helped me. It's time you bootstrap. If you bootstrap it, you're going to make it, and then we'll then yeah, see what we did. But that's really kind of the story of what happens in rural America with supporting entrepreneurship. And that's why it's so hard to get through what you're looking at of those chambers of commerce individuals, because they are so focused on the way it used to be and the way they're used to it, that we are now trying to shift the winds of change into building entrepreneurship, specifically in the rural areas.
Yeah, so Kaitlyn has actually interviewed Don Mackey on the show a few episodes ago. So yes, definitely familiar with his work, and that's what like with the field of ecosystem building is new enough, and it is completely separate than that. Let's recruit a business to come bring 100 jobs. Like both are important for chambers of commerce. I got it right this time, but they are different from one another. So even just like realizing that, and then also doing everything you can to support that kid in his garage wanting to ship fly fishes across the country. And you mentioned the internet earlier, Frank. Most businesses, if not all businesses, and the pandemic really highlighted this, either are fueled by or run on the internet. So having as fast of broadband speed as possible is incredibly important. And you can start, like Kaitlyn and I are very, very good friends, host this podcast together, have worked together now for about 6 months, and we've never been in the same room. We've only met over Zoom, which if you were to describe that to someone 10 years ago, or in the early 90s when you were driving the Flintstone car around Sydney, it would be tough to wrap your head around. But as long as you have a fast internet connection, you can practically do anything from your house.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, that's it. And here in Iowa, I'm not sure if you know the infrastructure, but in Southwest Iowa or across Iowa, we have more mom and pop telephone companies than any other state in the nation. We've got about 143 mom and pop independent entrepreneurial telephone companies. And those phone companies have reinvested in their community because it's, their neighbors on there have reinvested. And so we have many of our communities that have fiber to the home. So Kaitlyn, if you come up here, we can set you up in a town of 120 people, and you will have fiber to your home.
And they'll give you a free lot on which to build a house. So that's right. A whole nother entrepreneurial, piece of recruitment. Recruiting people.
So Nick, you can just come over here. And I can get to the airport faster than most people in West Omaha.
Yep.
And I live in West Omaha, so you would probably beat me there.
We should actually time it sometime. That would be really kind of interesting.
So I know we need to respect your time and wind this down. But so how do people find you guys? And Kaitlyn, it looks like you're kind of back on there. And Kaitlyn, I do want to promise we're going to have you back on the show, and we're gonna pick a date as soon as this show's over. We'll pick a date because we want to grab your expertise also in this. And
it's just the weather. It's
it
okay.
is. It really is.
It's just the weather. So we will have you back. So and there she went.
so
yeah,
how do people get a hold of you? Where can they find you? How can they tap into your podcast?
Yes. So if you search the Ecosystem Builder podcast wherever you listen to podcasts, we are the only one to come up, I believe. And you can also go to Mug.News. .news is actually a ending of a URL, kind of like .com. So if you type in Mug.News into your browser, our website will pop up, and you can read about the different communities and entrepreneurs and businesses across the middle. And for me personally, you can connect with me on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok at Nick Castner.
Okay. Yeah. I saw the friend request come in, and I haven't had a chance to say yes. So I'm not avoiding your friend request. I will.
So Frank, I actually had like 5 minutes to kill before this interview started, and was browsing the internet, killing some time, and then I came across your profile. I was like, I'm shooting the friend request, but it was backed up right to this interview, so I'm not concerned that I haven't gotten the approval yet.
Well, we are so grateful. And so if it's a podcast, you can listen to it anytime. But is there a certain time that if listeners wanted to do it live, they do? Do you do it live, or you just record and then, as people do?
We drop on Wednesday mornings. It is also on YouTube. That I know your audience is also on YouTube. Like this airs on YouTube. So if you go to Mug.News' YouTube account, you can find all of the video of the interview as well. But there's no live component. Live is actually kind of a whole thing to kind of pull off. That it is great to see you two executing it very, very well. But we have not added live in. However, episodes drop every Wednesday.
Okay.
All right.
Great.
Well, that's good to know.
Well, thank you for all that you do to support entrepreneurship. I mean, it's because of people like you that reinforce the work that we do across with boots on the ground, and it's going to take all of us to really turn the economy around. As we come out of COVID, there's new opportunities for telework. There's new opportunities for home-based businesses. There's just new opportunities, and people through this COVID might have lost their job, and they are entrepreneurs by necessity. And so it takes all of us to really build that support network around them and give them all the tools that they can have and help them succeed, but also help them not to be afraid to fail. I think that's a really important component of entrepreneurship that ecosystem building helps support. Is how do we support people that do fail, and how do they fail forward, learn from it, and start again and keep risking.
Yes, yeah. It is better to have tried and failed than to have never tried. And you learn so much in trying and putting yourself out there and experiencing a new situation that just taking that first step forward, it can be a huge benefit to your entire like professional career and personal life even. And I do think, to kind of continue to hype up rural communities, I do think the way rural communities are looked at and talked about and people interact with, I do think will change in the next decade as more people work remote. That I have two colleagues. One is living out of a trailer, and he's actually my direct boss at Herdat, but is going is kind of done with the whole city life, so is working and living out of this trailer through on national parks and just kind of wherever he chooses to drive. And then a different one moved to Valentine, Nebraska for 3 months, and she just worked remote because she wanted to experience the rural life. So with all the like cheap housing, the cost of living is so much lower. In some areas, you were talking about the fiber internet at where you're at in Iowa. That is quicker than my house in Omaha. My internet connection in Omaha is not very fast, frustratingly so. That I think rural communities are really poised to do well in the next decade. So I'm excited for them.
Yeah, and it's they have to be ready to accept an entrepreneur, and that's our podcast is called Think Like an Entrepreneur, Become a Spark Plug. Is that we help communities start to think like an entrepreneur so they can support entrepreneurship. And because I've been an entrepreneur for
your whole life.
My whole life, basically. I just happen to work for some other people and for the government every once in a while as an interim, the bridge in between entrepreneurial efforts. But we have been a company, an entrepreneurship company, since about 1999. In 2005, full time in our house, doing that, and we have that bug, but that support mechanism is really important of how people and how communities can think like that entrepreneur, so they know how an entrepreneur thinks, and they can kind of get out in front of them to build an ecosystem. And so we really want to thank you, Nick. Thanks for the time that you've taken.
And Kaitlyn, you're out there, we know.
Yes, yeah. Kaitlyn has a whole different and unique and incredibly valuable perspective than myself. So I'm excited to tune back into this show when she reappears, because she definitely has a value to share.
We're going to get her on her really quick on that.
We'll let Texas thaw out first, and then we'll figure out a time.
Can do that.
Get them stabilized again. But thank you so much, Nick, for joining us with Mug.News and with Herdat and all the places that you are working to help build entrepreneurial ecosystems on your platforms. And we're really grateful for that, because Frank's right. It takes all of us together to make this a better world.
So catch Nick and Kaitlyn on Ecosystem Builder podcast, and you can find that podcast wherever you listen to your own podcast. Just search for Ecosystem Builder. They release on Wednesdays. You'll get a new podcast every Wednesday. So join Nick and Kaitlyn and learn how to think like an entrepreneur on that. So we want to thank you, Nick. And we're going to sign off, but we'll be right back with you. So hang in. All right.
Alrighty.
Hey guys, thanks so much for joining us today. And as I was saying, you can catch us every day, Monday through Friday, 11:30 a.m. Central Time, right here on our YouTube channel at Rural Community Solutions TV. And we've got almost more than 130 videos on a whole host of issues that we help build entrepreneurship. So you can go there, do a search. You see our processes. You can hear our philosophy on there, or you can go to anchor.fm/Frank Spillers, and you can catch our podcasts of every YouTube that we do. Of Think Like an Entrepreneur, Become a Spark Plug, and you can listen to it while you drive. You can listen to it while you shovel your snow, mow your lawn, however you want to do that, or lay on the beach in your shorts while drinking your little umbrella drink.
Yes, that wraps us back up to where we started here. So that was really good segue there, honey. So I'm Kim Spillers, and
I'm Frank Spillers.
We appreciate you joining us today. And we focus, we niche in rural America, and anything that we can do to support rural, that's what we want to do. So if you have any questions, want to reach out, Kim at G Horizons or Frank at G Horizons. So thank you so much for being with us, and we'll send you off to your day. Have a great one.
We'll see you tomorrow at 11:30 a.m. Central, right here, Rural Community Solutions TV.